Hello everyone, this is Damon with Pixnub. In this video, I'll be going over the layer structure for the jersey template. This template comes with 5 different layouts, and with each of these, the layer structure is very similar, so I'll just be going over one of those in detail in this video, but you can apply this to all 5 of the layouts as well. Also, this template does come with some color changing actions, so you can change all the colors in your template without actually going into the layers. Just by clicking on the actions, you can set those colors up. So actually a lot simpler to do it this way, but I'll be going over that in the next video. In this video, I'm going to be showing how to manually go into your layers and set everything up and just explain how all the layers are structured. So in this template, you'll see 2 folders when you open it. One is the folder that contains the player, and the other group folder contains everything behind the player. And how I structure all of my templates is I usually try to group them in 3 folders, one behind the player, one with the player or team images, and then one, if there's anything in front of them, there'll be a folder above that. And you'll see in the team one, since there is text in front of the team, there'll be a folder called in front of team. So that's pretty much how I structure all of mine. I'm kind of OCD about layer structure and organization with group folders. That's just kind of how I do things. But I'm going to expand everything here, and then I'll hide all of the layers, and we'll discuss these one at a time. Okay, so this layer structure is pretty simple in this template. I like to keep things as simple as I can and still try to achieve the best effect I can with the most minimalistic layer styles often, because I think it's easier for the user that way, and it makes the templates lighter weight as well. So you see that there's not too many layers, but it does create a really great effect. So the first one I'll point out is this folder that says do not delete. That is actually behind the solid background color, so you'll never see that folder. But don't delete it, because it actually has in layers that are needed for the Photoshop actions to work. So what this layer actually contains, we're in the individual template here, but this actually contains the team text items, as well as the jersey holes group for the team name layer. And the reason why it's in here is that way when you record actions that set up a theme for an entire team, that same action will work for your individual template and your team template. So in order to do that without the action throwing in error, it needs all the layers. So anyway, just don't delete that, and your actions will work, and watch in the next video when I discuss those actions. So the next layer up is your color behind the jersey. Now this is just the color that you'll see through the holes in the jersey if you're using jersey holes, which are optional, but usually just black, because behind the jersey holes you wouldn't expect really any color, so solid black works best for that typically. The next layer up is just a solid color layer, and that just sets the color of the jersey. I'm going to disable those jersey holes here, but real quick before I do that, I'll show you that we have transparency through those jersey holes, and you're seeing the black behind that. So if you wanted to see a different color for whatever reason, you could change that. Like you could change it to a dark gray or whatever, but generally just leave that up black. So the jersey holes themselves are actually applied in a layer style up on this jersey group. I'll disable that for now, and we'll discuss that more when we get up to that layer. All right, so this is the main color of the jersey. And the next, you've got a text layer that's just the main jersey number here. And you can edit that like you would any other text. And then the color of that is just set in your character panel here, or if you click on your font, you can set that up here too. does the same thing. Let's just set this to a dark blue. I'm just going to go through basic template setup here. Now, when you see when I changed it up in the toolbar, it changed it here too in the character panel, but that's where your text color is set. Now the stroke around there, that's just in your layer style. It's just a basic stroke, nothing out of the ordinary there. Let's just set that to a gold color. I'm just going to make a blue and gold jersey color. I'm going to actually do a white jersey color here. So to set the jersey color to something else, you would do that in the layer below. And if you set it to white, you don't really want pure white. You want an off-white or like a really light gray. And the reason why is because if you want to add in the textures, just like for example, if we add in the textures to the jersey, if that is pure white, you're not going to be able to see any of those textures because there's no way for the texture to apply any shadowing if it's solid white. So generally, just a really light gray is best for that. Okay, let's disable these and work our way up here. So we've got our jersey numbers here and last name. It is the same exact thing here. So to set the color on the last name, you would do it the same way. I'll just click in here to get the same color as we use for the number. Actually, let's do this different. Let's do the let's match the gold there, and we'll match the stroke to the color of the number. All right, then the stroke, same thing. In your last name, it's under the stroke. We'll match that blue there. All right, that's the font for the jersey number and last name. And then the last layer with the font, it's the one called name-spa-smart. The text is actually inside of a smart object, which we can barely see now because that was set to an off-white. But if you double click your smart object and go into there, this is where you'll set the color in here and leave this extra space around the name. I discussed the reason why in some other videos I'm making a series for with smart objects with SPA, but in any case, just leave the spacing as it is. And if we're going to put a black, like a jersey, like we're going to put a black marker where they sign their jersey. So to do that, we don't want a pure black here. Let's give it maybe a brightness of, I think 28. I believe this is the number I've been using, 282828. So it's just a dark gray. And you'll save that. Make sure your smart object saves. And then when you close it, you can see the name in there. And I tried to create this to look like a signed jersey where they sign their name with a Sharpie. And you can see it's pretty blurry right now, and that is because of the smart filter that's being applied to that. So by editing the text in a smart object, we can apply a smart filter that gets automatically applied. Additionally, there's a layer mask. And that layer mask, if we go inside it, it's just basically your clouds filter in Photoshop with the levels adjusted. That just gives it a little bit of transparency in places. And so that makes it look like like if they were writing their name with a Sharpie. It's going to bleed. So that's where the fading and the blur is coming from, because the ink's going to bleed. And then also it's not going to be a solid black color. So if we can look at it without this and without the layer mask, if we were just to apply a font by itself, it wouldn't look anything like they'd sign their name with a marker. But all right, so anyway, with those two effects applied, this is what you get. And with SPA 11, it will actually replace text inside of a smart object. So if you're running SPA for this template, SPA 10 is not going to open up the smart object. SPA 11 will. And with SPA 11, what it's looking for is it's looking for the end of a layer name that's called SPA Smart, all caps, no spaces. And if it sees that, it will open up the smart object and look for text layers. I didn't program SPA to open up all smart objects, because with a template that's got a lot of smart objects that aren't needed for SPA, it would really slow the processing down. So that's why I have it look for this specific designator and only open up smart objects that end with the word SPA Smart. All right, so moving on, that looks, we've got our text in, but it looks pretty plain right now. And that's where the jersey holes and the textures come in. And so with the jersey holes, we'll enable the layer mask, and we can see that we've now got the jersey holes, and that actually applies a bevel in the layer style. It's just a regular bevel, which this is where the lighting effect is being applied, so we can see where the hole looks indented. And then above that, we've got two texture layers that are clipped. So we've got a cloth texture that just adds in like the weaves for the cloth. If you wanted to, you could go in and even adjust the scaling on that. Make the scaling smaller or larger as you see fit. Comes in at 60%, which is actually, I think, about right, but you can play with that if you want. You can also adjust the opacity of this, so you can make that really strong and really stick out if you want. It's up to you. Comes in with 50% opacity. This is just a basic overlay technique. I like to use the soft light blend mode. Some people use multiply, but for a lot of my stuff, I like to use soft light because that tends to keep tonal ranges better than overlay does. It doesn't shift hues as much. So in any case, overlay would work as well. And then cloth wrinkles is the last one. And this comes in at a pretty low opacity here. The original one I released was 20%, but some people said that was too strong, so I reduced that to 8%. But this is where you're setting the wrinkles in your cloth, so you can go pretty strong with it. I put a pretty strong texture in here because I figured you could always turn it down, but it was more difficult to turn it up because you would have to duplicate the layer if you wanted it stronger. So I put in a pretty strong one, but usually I think a pretty low opacity just to give it a hint of folds in the fabric. So you can play with that as you wish. And the last layer is the darken edges layer, which is just very subtle. If you turn this on, if you look at just the edges here, you'll see those just darken up just a bit. It's kind of like a vignetting effect, I think, but nothing that that'll be really noticeable. Just a subtle hint to your eyes draw closer to the brighter area. That's a soft light blend mode at 35%. Now, if you turn it up stronger, you can see that is now more pronounced on the edge, but generally just a little bit. I just like to darken those edges just a bit. And that's a black layer set to soft light blending mode. And then you have your layer mask for where those edges are being darkened. So that's it. That's all of the stuff that's behind the player. Now the player themselves, that's in a group, and in the layer mask for your group, this is where that sets up the transparency fade of your player. So if you don't want that, you can just disable that, or you could go into this and redraw in your own gradient wherever you want as you see fit. That's completely up to you. Now inside the player image folder, this is kind of like a Russian doll of folders here to get to your player. And this is all intentional by design. So the transparency is in this top group. Below that, there's a group called drop shadow, which has got a drop shadow effect on it. So if I undo this and re-click that, you can see that that adds this drop shadow in there. And I wanted that in a different group because if I put that drop shadow on the same group, you don't really see much of an effect there, but or much of a difference. But it can make a difference on which group. If the drop shadow is being applied on the same group as your transparency fade, sometimes it'll make the edges where it fades look different. It's really hard to notice in these colors, but in any case, I just felt it was best to separate those into separate groups. That way each effect is on its own group. And then with the player themselves, anything that's highlighted green is a where you'll replace the player. And there's an empty layer where you can manually put a player in here. And then there's your SPA player setup. So if you're not using SPA, you could just hide that and then use this manual player input. But by having this drop shadow here in the group above, when you put in a player manually, the drop shadow will automatically be there. As well as in SPA, if you don't want to use mode 5, so say you delete this, and then you go in and do a template setup, say you wanted to use mode 3, once you drop that into place, this whole group here, underneath that, underneath the drop shadow, you're inside the drop shadow folder. By doing it this way, your drop shadow doesn't get erased when you delete your SPA player and add in your new mode. And you can see that we've got our green man here and we've got that drop shadow still applied. Now the drop shadow will actually work identical if you put it in the SPA player group. It will work identical if we put it directly on the SPA player as well. You can see that there's no difference there. The only difference with the drop shadow is, like I say, sometimes if it's in the same group as your transparency fade, that can make it the shadow more pronounced where it shouldn't be. This example doesn't really show it here, but there are examples that do. But in any case, that drop shadow would look the same regardless of which group. But if I put it inside this SPA group, like I say, when you throw that away and add in the new one, your drop shadow is now gone. And you'd have to re-add it. So by doing it the way we did here, your drop shadow now remains. I hope that makes sense. In any case, only other thing I'll point out is that if you're running SPA, this comes with, let me show you here. This comes by default with player mode 5. And honestly, mode 5 is not the best mode to use. What I like to, oops, didn't mean to do that. What I like to actually use whenever possible is modes 2, 3, 4, or 11, 12, 13. Those modes have better scaling or more repeatable scaling because they scale top of the head to the bottom of the feet. So what you would do is you'd put the bottom of the feet off canvas and you'd get a much more reliable scaling to your player image. Modes 1, 5, and 6 only scale by the head, and so you get more variation because people can be the same height with different sizes of heads. However, I put mode 5 in here because I don't know if everybody's shooting with feet in their image. So because of that, with the templates that I release, I stick to modes 1, 5, or 6 generally, because if somebody is shooting waist up, for example, and they put in a mode that scales head to foot, and they only have an image that's waist to the top of the head, that image would enlarge to where wherever they cropped in camera would go all the way to the bottom of that mode alignment, if that makes sense. I got other videos to discuss that in more detail, but just know that if you're using SPA and you've got feet in your image, you might want to just discard this mode 5 and then use in, like I say, modes 2, 3, 4, 11, 12, or 13 would be the preferred modes. Anyway, hope this helps. Thanks for watching, and make sure to watch the next video where I discuss in detail these color changing actions, which are super cool. Like, for example, if we were to play one of these actions here, you can see that we've, with one click, changed the color of all the elements in the design. Thanks for watching.